Welcome to a special bonus episode of Cinemaholics. And it's a bonus because we're talking about a movie a little bit earlier because there are so many releases hitting theaters this summer. We cannot get to them at all. So we are visiting a little place called Asteroid City. I'm John Agroni, and he's Will Ashton. Hey, Will.
I was going to do a good solid howdy, but I realized as I was getting ready to say that I don't think any characters say like howdy, or
not even the character named Montana says howdy.
Right, exactly. So it didn't seem appropriate, but nevertheless, howdy, John.
We're back talking about another Wes Anderson movie. Last Wes Anderson movie was The French Dispatch, which we both enjoyed quite a bit.
Yeah, it was in my top 10 for 2021.
I really liked it as well. It was in, I think, my top 15. Great movie. And, you know, we had a whole conversation last time about our thoughts on Wes Anderson's filmography. You can go visit that episode if you're curious. But I mean, the short version is that we both like Wes Anderson as a whole. You and I have different favorites among his filmography, but there aren't a lot that either of us like actually dislike, right?
Yeah, I mean, the only one I haven't seen is Bottle Rocket. The only one
we mentioned that last time. Yeah,
right. I still haven't seen it.
Same here.
There's an update. But the only one I remember feeling, and I'm sure I said this last time, the only one I remember having mixed feelings on was Life Aquatic, which I think I'm just due for a rewatch on. I think I was just too young to understand that sort of like midlife crisis dramedy at that time. But I don't know. I feel like I would have been, if I watched it now, I would have been probably more receptive to kind of the shagginess of it, the kind of general kind of malaise of it. But yeah, I don't know. At the time, I was a little kind of disappointed. But other than that, I've liked or loved pretty much all of his films.
And I don't just like his films. I like talking about his films because Wes Anderson is that kind of director who just he's a style unto himself. Everybody has their own take on him. And I always appreciate a director who is very specific in the kinds of movies that they want to make, the things they want to say, their own style that is distinctly them, because it's just nice. It's his branding in a way. But also the people who don't click with that, they can just choose not to watch his movies and they're none the wiser, aren't they? When we talked about French Dispatch, remember one thing we said was that it probably wasn't a great entry point movie for people who had never seen a Wes Anderson movie. And, you know, everybody has a different opinion on what that entry point probably should be. I've said that my favorite is Moonrise Kingdom. I think one of your favorites among his is Grand Budapest Hotel.
It's one of them, yeah.
You know, and it is hard to pick a favorite. I know a lot of people love Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yep.
With Asteroid City, this is his latest. This is a movie that it's his first movie that he's coming out with that isn't delayed or dealing with big production issues. Because French Dispatch, we watched that in 2021, late 2021, but that was supposed to come out early 2020, I believe. And this new movie, I mean, it is like, who is not in Asteroid City? I wanted to go to this place because it's like so many celebrities I get to see every which way.
I mean, you say that, but like two of Wes Anderson's most notable cast members are not even in this: Bill Murray and Owen Wilson.
Well, do they have room? That's the thing. we have a few actors here who I believe it's their first time in a Wes Anderson film, if I'm not mistaken. That includes Tom Hanks and Steve Carell. I believe Rupert Friend is his first time in one. Maybe I'm forgetting. I don't want to say this and be incorrect, but Matt Dillon. Yeah.
Yeah. I forget if Matt Dillon has been in one or not, but Maya Hawke, this is her first Wes Anderson joint.
Yeah. Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie, yeah.
It might be easier to say who was back. I mean, Scarlett Johansson is back. Jason Schwartzman, of course. Adrien Brody, Liev Schreiber. We have Rupert Friend. I don't think has been in one before.
Remind me again which one Scarlett Johansson was in?
Isle of Dogs.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
We have Jeffrey Wright, of course, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, so Edward Norton. It's a nice mixing. It's a swimming pool in this little asteroid city. Now You've been looking forward to this movie a lot, right? Because there's even more actors, by the way, but I'm just kind of holding back a little bit. But you've been looking forward to this one quite a bit. This movie, this has been one of your most anticipated.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I think it was in my top 3 for the most anticipated for the summer. Just because, I mean, who cannot get excited about a Wes Anderson movie? I say that.
Plenty of people.
I was going to say, knowing that he is a fairly divisive figure. I mean, not divisive, I think, in the sense that he's controversial or anything. I just think...
as a person, I don't think,
Right. But I think, yeah, some people jive with his style, some people don't. But I think, I've heard people say like they prefer his earlier work, but don't really like the newer stuff, or vice versa. To me, like as much as I love the earlier films, I think Royal Tenenbaum remains my favorite of his, as well as Rushmore being a close second. But I think with these new ones, especially with this one, it's interesting that you note that French Dispatch is kind of a not really a bearer of entry for Wes Anderson. I feel like this one's even more potentially alienating, no pun intended, as far as its style, not because it's like harder to grasp or anything, but rather I feel like this one is sort of more like metatextual. It's like examining Wes Anderson in a way that I feel like you kind of have to know about him more and appreciate him more to kind of get the full experience of it. And that's not to say that like a first time viewer wouldn't get something out of this film, but I feel like what I am really responding to with this film is thinking about where it stands in his filmography and where he is as an artist right now. But going off of that, I think the thing that's
if I can say real quick, I kind of disagree with you. I actually do, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious to hear about that more. But I was gonna say, I mean, the thing I think we can agree on is that stylistically, like the density of his images at this point, like the way that people kind of comment often on like the picture book style, and like there's been sort of this trend of late with like people trying to do like AI Wes Anderson, like AI Wes Anderson does The Matrix, or AI Wes Anderson does Succession or something. But I feel like what people don't really get is that like, yeah, he has these sort of like compact frames and like, these kind of high stylistic sets and all this stuff, but it's like the frames themselves are so jam-packed with like images and things going on. He's just so particular about the framing and the way the camera moves. And I think with this movie in particular, he feels even more confident, even more kind of assured in what he's doing, and lending that to this kind of, like I said, metatextual story, I think is really astounding stuff.
And well, you're doing it again. You're reviewing the movie before I've had a chance to tell people what the movie's about.
You know me, John. That's what I do.
That's what the listeners want, if I'm being honest.
I like that not to be a little bit metatextual about myself, but I like that my audio reviewing style is like I review the film too early. And then like when I write a review, as you know, as my editor, I take too long to actually talk about it. I kind of like do like self-analysis.
Yeah, usually start off with like a little bit of an appetizer, just like, well, who loves these dogs?
Right.
Yeah.
In 1995, I went to summer camp.
And then you end up talking about the movie Royal Tenenbaums.
Right.
So needless to say, we're fans of Anderson's work, and this new film he directed, written, and co-produced. Roman Coppola also worked on the story, of course, the son of Francis Ford Coppola. And aside from this huge cast and this, kind of retro futuristic place, this is also kind of a little bit of a COVID movie, sort of. They made it while there were still COVID precautions in place, and the story kind of mirrors some of like lockdown and quarantine, and that factors in quite a bit.
I mean, this movie basically says the bubble, you can go to hell.
Well, so what we're alluding to is that in this movie, it takes place in 1955. There is a junior stargazer convention, which, very Wes Anderson kind of event. I was sold immediately on that as the premise, but you have a bunch of people gathering around the country for this competition. It takes place in this sort of fictional desert town where an asteroid hit a long time ago, and so it's a bit of like a tourist attraction, and it's good because we get to sort of be introduced to Asteroid City alongside the other characters. We end up there pretty early on, and we see what the town is made up of. It's kind of like Radiator Springs, if you like the Cars movies, and there's your frame of reference almost.
But that movie, funny enough, has Owen Wilson. This one doesn't.
That's right. You beat me to it. There's also another kind of gimmick going on with this movie, a little bit less appreciated, I think, by the folks who saw this at Cannes, because it has gotten reviews already, and we'll get to the Rotten Tomatoes game, but there's this meta-ness to it that it's a radio play within a TV broadcast. So there's a lot of fourth wall breaking. I don't even know if you can call it fourth wall. Maybe it's fifth wall breaking.
I don't think it's just a radio play. I think it is a play.
It's a play, but it's based on a radio play, right?
That's it. Yeah.
And yeah, it's a little confusing. But I mentioned earlier that I think that this movie is a better entry point than French Dispatch, and I actually think that it's a decent entry point for a lot of his filmography. I don't think it's the best Wes Anderson movie to start with, but I think if you are going to start with one and you want to start with a new one, this is the one, because unlike some of the recent movies, including Isle of Dogs and Grand Budapest Hotel to an extent, we really are following 3 or 4 like central characters. This is not as meandering a movie as some of his previous work, and it does meander. Do not get me wrong. This is a very oddly structured movie, and it even tells you exactly how it's going to be structured ahead of time. There's a lot of like, here's what's going to happen at the end of the movie, and here are the next few scenes you're going to watch. But at the heart of it, and one of the reasons I kind of connected with this movie more than I thought I might, is we're really following Jason Schwartzman's character and his family, him and Jake Ryan, Tom Hanks as well, and his daughters, because there's a story about grief going on here where they arrive in Asteroid City, and Jason Schwartzman is a war photographer. He is kind of struggling to admit to his kids that their mother died. And his son, played by Jake Ryan, who you might remember from 8th grade, he's one of the competitors in this competition for the junior stargazers to win these awards. And he is a little bit of an outcast and a loner, and he tries to sort of like strike up a friendship with the other junior stargazers there. And then you also have Jason Schwartzman kind of building up a budding, perhaps romance with Scarlett Johansson, who plays a very classic 1950s actress. So I'll say at the outset, I like this movie quite a bit for that reason. And I think that I really connected with, I think Jason Schwartzman in general, if you put him in a Wes Anderson movie, I'm much more likely to really, really connect with that Wes Anderson movie, because I just think that he's one of the best weapons in Anderson's arsenal. And that's proven here, almost to the detriment of some of the other characters, because there are other people here who are kind of overshadowed to some extent. Not all of them, but for example, Liev Schreiber. I still don't know exactly why he said yes to this, because he's a bit underutilized. Chau gets a blink and you miss it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think Liev Schreiber is so funny in this movie.
He is funny. He has like 2 scenes of note that stuck out to me, but there are other characters who stand out more, I think, like Maya Hawke and Rupert Friend, one of my favorite subplots in this. Lots of subplots here, but no, what do you think of this movie, Will? Do you find this to be a tricky entry point?
Yeah, no, I think it's, as I was saying before, I would find this one maybe a little bit harder to sell to maybe someone who isn't already sold on Wes Anderson, in a way that, like, if I were to introduce him to one of his films, I'd pick probably like Rushmore, Grand Budapest, or Moonrise Kingdom. And it's funny I bring up Moonrise Kingdom, because I feel like going into this, I was kind of expecting this to be sort of in that vein of Moonrise. Not that it's not, but like,
sort of is.
The idea here, of course, being that because they're all sort of quarantined into this small town due to this extraterrestrial activity, it becomes sort of like a summer camp, not only for the children, but for the adults. And there's this sort of
that, and also the actual, like, the romance very much reminds me of Moonrise Kingdom.
Yes, exactly. But to me, I think the one Wes Anderson movie this reminded me of the most, which I wasn't expecting but intrigued me, was Darjeeling Limited. I don't know if you felt that same way, but the idea of like kind of being both trapped and open in this space and dealing with grief and loss, and kind of in these characters in this sort of midpoint, and they're trying to figure out like how they can mature and evolve and go through their grief in a productive and meaningful way, especially with their family. I think the stuff that you're talking about, like with Jason Schwartzman and Tom Hanks, really reminded me of that in a good way. I really do think Darjeeling Limited is one of his more underrated films, so I say that definitely as a compliment. But yeah, I think to me, I feel like Wes Anderson is using this film to really kind of go through some stuff personally. Like, it seems like a lot of their stuff in this movie, especially in the third act, seems to be not only kind of commenting on like common notes or criticisms of his films, like in a kind of funny or direct way, but also like him just kind of evaluating like, who am I as an artist right now? Like, what do I want to do? Why am I saying the things I want to say? in a way that I find really kind of compelling and interesting. And I don't know if it always fuses as well together with this dual narrative that's going on, but I think it is the type of Wes Anderson film that will grow on me more with time. And I think even a rewatch would make me appreciate him more. So I'm definitely a fan. I'm not quite sure in terms of like the ranking of his films where this stands for me, but I definitely am really taken in by it as I expect it to be.
I always struggle to rank his films at all, so I usually don't even bother. For me, I love stepping into a Wes Anderson movie because I know that when I do, I'm just going to be transported. I think that Anderson is a true artist in the sense that you mentioned it earlier, he focuses not just on framing for the sake of it and putting things into a shot, not just because he thinks it'll look cool, is because I think he genuinely wants other people to be in his head. He wants other people to be in his art. Yeah. I think that's what makes him a true artist. And it's always so inspiring to see, even in his movies where I'm not as taken with the story or the characters, which has happened a few times. I think that I'm always impressed by this guy's life, the fact that he just has these great opportunities to really just make stuff that you genuinely get the sense that he loves to make. Right. And he's like a true artisan in that sense. And I understand that it can be frustrating for some folks because his movies are a different vibe. They are a sort of they sort of all go for this, characters who are very disconnected from the real world. It's anti-realism. They all sort of talk in this very like monotone specific way, and it's fun for I think some people to be like, well, I'm going to parody a Wes Anderson thing, and I love Wes Anderson parodies, and I think you can enjoy those plenty without sort of taking the piss out of him as a director and writer, because I don't think anybody can quite do it like he does, right? And I think that what impresses me about this movie, Asteroid City, is that he's still finding new things to do. I don't think that you can just take this movie and put it through an AI blender. You really see that like he is the kind of person who focuses not just so much on the way shots are developed and delivered, but also his dialogue. You've teased it already, but this is definitely a funny movie, much funnier than French Dispatch was, I think, for me. And French Dispatch, I thought, had some pretty good laughs. But this movie, I was chuckling very consistently. And I think that, first of all, Jake Ryan is a big reason for that. I think that he's just such a talented young actor. And I think that his entire, like him as Jason Schwartzman's son is just like incredible casting. Now, I said this already too. I don't think every character gets fully utilized. There were some returning Wes Anderson actors who didn't win me over as readily. I kind of was a little let down by the Jeffrey Wright character in this. Maybe I'm in the minority on that. I didn't find him as fun.
Oh, I thought there's a speech scene he does, which I think is one of the funniest scenes in this whole movie.
I didn't find it as funny. Maybe what was great about it went over my head. Who knows? But Tom Hanks, he gets some good moments in this. Adrien Brody and Edward Norton aren't in this a ton, but every time they show up, they both sort of play. They each play respectively a playwright and director. And there was something about, I think, getting to what you're saying, when the movie almost becomes like a primal scream that Anderson is like kind of shouting at the audience, just being like, "Hey, I'm over here," and there's something kind of fascinating about it. But then this is a movie that's all about the little moments. It's about Maya Hawke trying to teach a bunch of kids about the solar system, and she just can't do it until Montana shows up. It's Steve Carell explaining real estate to Liev Schreiber.
Well, I mean, not only is she trying to do that, but she's trying to balance like the science teaching with her innate faith and her kind of
and her innate fear and paranoia. It's wonderful. Tony Revolori also comes back in this very, very small role, and Willem Dafoe as well. But everybody gets a chance, to kind of shine. It does remind me more of a play than it does a movie in some senses. I could see some people walking away from this movie being like, "Who cares? I don't understand what the fuss is all about." But no, my time in Asteroid City was time well spent. When you get to the point in the movie where maybe the quarantine isn't going to last forever. I was like, "Are you sure?" I think this is definitely, we've gotten plenty of movies that have been subtly about COVID and quarantines and lockdowns. And this is definitely one of the better ones in terms of like, it's able to be about that without hitting you over the head with it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think something else that should be admired or noted here is like, I think since Fantastic Mr. Fox, it's been interesting to see how like cartoonish his movies have kind of gotten, not only in animation but in live action.
Well, absolutely. Yeah.
Even with this one, like a very direct homage and nod to the Roadrunner scene throughout. But I think some people sort of mistake that for being that his films are coming more frivolous. And I think that's something that I notice a lot with French Dispatch. Like, I think people were kind of downplaying the real emotionality of that film, and what I think I really responded to, in addition to it being just so fun and entertaining. But I think this movie, it seems to be kind of directly commenting on like, oh, like why are characters acting like quirky for the sake of it, or like why do these characters have motivations? It seems to be, to me, I take it as both him kind of being like, well, no, like there's points to this, but also him kind of being like, well, sometimes I just don't know why I do things. Like, I mean, I just kind of think they're funny or they're interesting to me. And I think it's him. Yeah.
I've said this before, and I'm not trying to be offensive, but I genuinely believe Anderson kind of approaches the world as somebody who is on the spectrum. I think he genuinely is just like, I want to make movies where everybody in the world is on the spectrum, and everybody in the world kind of has this same sort of like, very like offbeat, sort of very meticulous look at everything the way that I do. And, I want to be careful in the way I say that, because I don't think it's not to diminish, obviously that at all. But I do think that that's genuinely the kind of stuff that he wants to make. I
mean, I saw you write that on Letterboxd. I think I get what you're saying. I don't know if I entirely agree, because I don't know. I don't know if he's on the spectrum or not. But no, I think he's just kind of pointedly very stylistic. I think we said this even in our French Dispatch review, but I tend to look at it as, I think he kind of looks at the world in his movies as the way he wants the world to be, how like orderly he kind of likes things to be. But there's also a lot of like sort of spontaneity and goofiness and like off-kilter things that happen.
That's kind of what I'm saying, right? Because like it to me, like that, for me, that's been my experience on the spectrum, is that I want everything to be a certain way, but then the world is too messy and I constantly have to like adjust and make changes to myself. And then some of the most, the deepest catharsis I get is when the world sort of balances out and I don't feel like totally alienated. More puns. But again, that's a very personal thing to me. I wouldn't dare, assume that that's the same way people are grappling with this movie.
I only say it because, like, it's something I've thought about, especially also being on the spectrum. Like, if that's kind of intentional, I just don't want to assume that, because I feel like that might potentially kind of diminish what he's doing in some ways. Like, I don't know. I mean, I would like to believe that's the read, but I also don't want to just assume it's sort of confined,
like intentional.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think.
Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he just, like we said before, has a very kind of specific style and a very specific way of looking at the world and how things can kind of be sort of like in this dollhouse that he makes, but like always kind of expanding and evolving in different ways. It's almost kind of like the end of the Lego movie, but like with very like corduroy suits and like all these different things.
Well, on that note, I do want to say that one thing that I think gets lost about Wes Anderson sometimes when people discuss his movies is that one of his secret talents, not secret, but one of his underappreciated talents, is how good he is at directing younger actors. And I don't just mean like kids, but I mean, I do mean kids, but also just actors who are very, very like early on in their careers. And I think that he just has this way about finding what it is that like makes a kid so strange and kind of wrapping a whole movie around it, like finding that connection between adults and kid. Fantastic Mr. Fox, I think, is one of the best examples of this. And for sure, I would say that people sometimes just look at his movies and on the surface level, they kind of seem like, oh, these are movies for adults. But maybe that's why Moonrise Kingdom is my favorite, because that's kind of all about like how children, the next generation, are just this brimming with like hope for the future. And it's such a, winning escapist sort of fantasy that he kind of blends with his like ultra realistic, approach that, yeah, it makes you yearn for a different place, not to get a little Mad Men about it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think initially, like, I remember when I was like a teenager and hearing about Fantastic Mr. Fox being made, obviously I was really super excited because it was like, Roald Dahl and Wes Anderson. And it's fitting that the next Wes Anderson movie is also going to be a Roald Dahl adaptation. But I think it ended up working as well as it did because, like, I think he's good about capturing that sort of whimsy, like you're saying, that sort of grandiosity of it, but also like not talking down the children or not kind of like looking down and like really understanding and appreciating their kind of wide-eyed view of the world, but also like acknowledging the darkness and the tragedy of it. And I think that's why a lot of the scenes that really work here are some of the ones with Jason Schwartzman and his kids, not only with his son, but with his daughters, who are also very funny in this movie.
Very funny. And by the way, Jake Ryan, I didn't mention this before, but this is his third Wes Anderson film. He was in Moonrise Kingdom, and he did voice a character in Isle of Dogs. So he's a bit of he's definitely one of Anderson's like acolytes.
Oh, sure.
Call him that.
I mean, I think there is sort of a familial aspect to Wes Anderson, where it's like if he likes you, you're in the family. You'll get a call back at some point.
Yeah, this is a Fast and Furious for cinephiles, right, or I guess theater nerds.
Who knows? We hipsters.
There you go. Yeah, there has been a bit since you bring it up. A big shift, I think, in the culture between like what were hipsters in like the 20 teens, the early 20 teens, and then what are hipsters today. And it's like such a different thing. And again, I think that that's what I constantly enjoy about Anderson as a director is that he kind of changes with the times. He's hip, man. Like he's kind of always like finding the kid or finding the heart in like wherever the world is at. And I think that's what stuck out to me while I was watching this, because I was like, yeah, he's going for the COVID thing, but he's really like digging deep. Like he's not just, this isn't locked down, he's not just sort of trying to take something that he's like kind of barely experiencing, and kind of like cheaply like repurposing that into a bunch of like dramatic, tension to try to make himself feel better about the world. Maybe he is doing that, but
no, I think he's trying to make himself feel better about the world. But to your point, it's not opportunistic. Like it's not him. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Him trying to.
He's putting himself in the heads. He's putting it empathy first, not just his own interpretations of the world.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to remember exactly where I was leading with this, but I do think, like I said before, that he is kind of working through some things. Like I don't know. I mean, I don't want to assume what's going through Wes Anderson's head, but the vibe I kind of get from this movie is that like he's middle age and like he's kind of probably working through some things in lockdown. He was kind of just like evaluating himself, his career, who he is, how he's perceived as an artist. And I feel like that really kind of bleeds itself into this film, both in the sense of like how he approaches this film, but also how the characters interact, and also how like the artists in this film respond to their art and their collaborators and all that stuff. And I think that's really intriguing and also pretty beautiful, especially towards the end.
I want to jump on something regarding that too, because I took a look at some of the reactions out of Cannes and just to kind of see how people reacted, and lots of love from this movie. I mean, we'll play the Rotten Tomatoes game and we'll mention some of the folks we know who saw it, but I did see some real contention over the radio play slash TV broadcast gimmick. And I was a little bit torn because there were times in the movie where I was like, I don't want to cut to that right now. I want to just stay in Asteroid City. Don't make me leave. But I think by the end, it did come together for me. I did sort of get the sense that, giving me a chance to yearn for that location, because I love the location. I just love that little desert town and its weird world so much. But I think getting away from it actually was kind of helpful in making me sort of like wish for it to come back. And also at the same time, give me chances to sort of connect with, I think that some of the stuff you're referring to in terms of, the Adrien Brody and Edward Norton sort of asides that we get in this movie, to be like, all right, well, let's step away from this like weird little story I made up and kind of like, almost like, sitting down and being like, all right, we've had a lot of laughs tonight, but, it's time to talk about something kind of important,
Right. And as well.
Be nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't be a bully. But were you torn about that same kind of thing, or did you find it to kind of just work?
I think it worked. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, obviously the ads don't really show any of that. It's like all black and white. Obviously, it's like 4:3 frame. So like none of that seen in the trailer. I had no idea that was going to be a factor in the film. I like when it starts that way, I thought that was just going to be like how the story was kind of bookended. So like when it would kind of cut back to that, or like have like this sort of like play structure where we see like, you know, act 1, act 5, act 3, intermission, if wanted, you know, all these things. Yeah, I mean, I was, I think, a little taken aback, but I trusted Wes Anderson to kind of be like, okay,
Right.
like, I don't think he's just doing this for the sake of it. But I also just think it's interesting, like, if you compare this film with Grand Budapest, like, it seems like he's playing with structure in a pretty interesting way. And I don't know too much about the next one, but I've heard, like, the Roald Dahl one that he's doing for Netflix is, like, based almost entirely, like, on a stage. And so I don't know if that kind of was infused by his work in Asteroid City, but yeah, it just seems like he's playing with like style and structure in really interesting ways, and obviously like his visual style as well, like kind of allowing himself to kind of play with aspect ratio and stuff, not in a way that feels kind of frivolous, as I think some people, like when they do like 4:3, like, oh, it makes it seem, you know, more artsy that way or whatever. I think he's like kind of doing it to show the confinements, the characters, and kind of the ways that they're kind of blocked in, and also like how drab the world can see if they don't have like this art or ways to kind of express themselves.
I took it as, yeah, the limited perspective of the characters. Right. I think that's like the exact, you know, vibe that he's going for.
But no, I mean, I get what you're saying, because like, I think a lot of the stuff in Asteroid City also feels kind of inspired by some of his like, you know, upbringing. Like he grew up in Texas and stuff. And I think there is like that kind of small town eccentricity, like kind of going back to that. I mean, I'm assuming, of course, that that's like found a lot in Bottle Rocket, and it seems like that's like it's really like kind of rejuvenating for him to kind of play with that again, because you know we're used to him going to like obviously like French Dispatch, and I mean I guess we could also say the same about Moonrise Kingdom. That's kind of also kind of Americana.
Yeah. But and to be clear, this movie takes place in the California-Nevada border.
Right.
So it's like a desert border town. Think Area 51 if it had a gift shop.
Right. But I was being like, I was just thinking of like obviously French Dispatch is in France, and then like Isle of Dogs is in Japan.
Yeah, he's been kind of all over the map.
Budapest.
And this does feel like sort of a return to, you know, return home.
Yeah, return home. Bit. Yeah, and I just, yeah, I think it's just really fun and invigorating to see.
Yes, I'm always a sucker for the retro futurism in movies like this. You know, there's a lot of like Day of the Earth Stood Still, I think, in this.
You mean
and
sci-fi.
Say again?
You mean like I wasn't really sure what you meant by the futurist.
Retrofuturism? Yeah. You know, there's like a scene where we see like what the junior stargazers have invented, and it's very like Fallout. It's very like sci-fi speculative, and it's really, really fun.
Shout out to the stop motion animation throughout as well. I think that's all fantastic.
I was about to mention Kim Kukulier is the animator who I just think just always deserves so much real like particular praise for her work, because not just with Wes Anderson, you know, she was of course Isle of Dogs, Fantastic Mr. Fox, but also My Life as a Zucchini, and most recently Pinocchio. She's a true artist, and you know Anderson is lucky to have her as a collaborator, because the things that she can do with puppets, out of this world, pun intended.
Oh yeah, and I mean, we never really talked about My Life as a Zucchini, but if anyone gets a chance, that's an awesome movie.
Really good.
Yeah.
All right, so that's Asteroid City. We're fans, and I agree with you to the extent that I could see myself deepening in my appreciation for it even further. This is one of those times where Anderson is kind of doesn't really care when he releases his movies in terms of like the Oscar buzz of it all. French Dispatch was released during Oscar season, award season, but this movie is hitting in the middle of the summer, and I love it when he does that. I love it when you like with Grand Budapest Hotel. That was like what, the spring, or like, you know, like early spring. I love it when he does that, because it's confidence. It's sort of like, I just want people to watch my movies. And there are times when releasing a movie during award season is not good because there's too much, you know, noise around that time of year. But this is coming out at a time where we don't have a lot of movies like this coming out in theaters, at least. Right now, it's all about, you know, Fast and Furious and Spider-Man and Flash, and I'm just very appreciative that Asteroid City is going to be out there for our grandparents. The geezers get to have something fun to watch, you know, the boomers and whatnot.
Yeah.
But also the weirdos like you and me, and hopefully all of you listening.
I mean, and also like this is just such a summer movie. Like it, you know, even though people go to the movies during the summer to escape the heat, you love kind of being in this kind of balmy fun, location. And I think they shot it in Spain, if I heard correctly, but
They shot it, I just heard you say, I think they shot it in space. I'm pretty sure I heard that wrong.
no, Spain.
They were supposed to shoot it in Rome, but you're right. They did move over to Spain, and Chinchon.
Yeah. But also, I mean, as far as any like awards potential for this film, I mean, for one, I really hope this gets nominated for Best Cinematography. I don't know what else is going to be up this year, but the cinematography film is as good, if maybe even better than anything he's done to date. But also,
it makes me wish there was a Best Ensemble because,
well, there is at the Screen Actors Guild, I guess. But
right.
But in any case, I don't think he really, focuses that much on awards for his film. But also, like, his most award-friendly film was Grand Budapest, which came out like March.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's that confidence of like, I'm just going to make a great movie, and if he wins awards, sure. But it's not his priority, right? And I think he made the right bet there. And we have been kind of seeing some changes in terms of like which movies get all the buzz and acclaim. The last couple of years, it's been Coda, which was a summer movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, which was a spring movie. I think the changes in technology and social media campaigns, and particularly like Oscar influencer people, has kind of shifted sort of the expectations of like, it didn't premiere at TIFF or Telluride, so I guess that means it's not going to be nominated for. That's changing quite a bit.
Yeah, I sure hope so.
Yeah, it definitely makes it so that we don't have all the best movies of the year crammed together at the end of the year,
yeah.
And we can have a more normal release structure so that more people can actually watch these movies. That's what I want. But that's Asteroid City. It's going to be in movie theaters. Let me make sure I have this right. It's getting a wide release on June 23rd, and it's going to be getting a limited release on June 16th. So just a couple days from when we're recording this. So if it's in your area, I'm assuming it's limited release. It's going to be like New York, LA, maybe some other like urban markets in North America. But definitely go check this out if you have the time and you do not feel like watching The Flash. I think you'll have a much better time with this movie than The Flash. I almost guarantee it. But I know there's a couple of you listening. You're a couple freaks and geeks, and so I love you. But you do what you want to do. Double feature it if you want.
I mean,
but anyway.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I really enjoy Wes Anderson. He's like a blind buy for me in terms of theatricality. But
sure.
I feel like every one of his movies, especially of late, are amplified by the big screen. Like I don't, even if you don't love the movie, I would be hard pressed to imagine anyone thinking like this is an unworthy theatrical experience just because of how visually grand it is. And like I said, that density of frame and everything he's able to, put on the screen here in a very purposeful, but also fun way. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would suggest, people, if they have any interest at all, or even are just curious, to check it out in theaters.
Yeah. It's also one of the shortest movies you can watch in theaters right now. Just 105 minutes. Pretty easy. Easy breezy. All right, let's play the Rotten Tomatoes game. Let's do it.
Sure.
We have 79 reviews counted. Most of them are canned reviews, but we do have more and more critics who are jumping on and watching this one from other parts of the globe. So, Will, Ashton, what do you think? What do you think this Asteroid City movie has on Rotten Tomatoes right now?
I mean, it's
probably going to change.
Going to be subject to change since we're doing this fairly early. And I imagine the reviews are still going to be incoming. But I think for the time being, knowing that the reviews, like you said, were strong out of Cannes, knowing that people are generally responding to this film, maybe not as much as like something like Grand Budapest, but probably more so than French Dispatch. I'm going to say this is comfortably probably at like 84% right now.
You're a bit off,
okay,
unfortunately. Do you think it's lower than you just guessed or higher than you just guessed?
I mean, I know generally the Cannes Film Festival, the reviews are fairly muted unless it's like, Killers of the Flower Moon. So I'm going to assume they're lower, maybe a little bit more measured. Then they'll probably go up as more critics get a chance to see the film. But I'll say 76%.
72%.
Oh.
And it's a mix. A lot of the like big outlets like The Wrap, Rolling Stone, Time, like all kind of panned it. It's of course getting high marks now. I actually think that it's getting higher marks than some people expected out of Cannes, because if you actually look at the reviews that have been dropping over the last few days, a lot of them positive. IGN, Slate, Atlantic, Slants, they're saying, you know what, Asteroid City, Party City, let's go. I didn't know I was going with that. 72%. We don't have an audience score or a cinema score yet, but we do have we can take a look at the Letterboxd here. We only have 8.7 thousand watches. Again, it's still super early. That's actually pretty decent for pre-release. But yeah, what do you think the average rating is currently? We're really just kind of doing the average rating for, critics and industry folks, but yeah.
Sure. Well, I might have a better chance then. I'm going to say 3.4.
Very close, 3.6, just a little tick higher. Look, fans of the show, or friends of the show, I should say, are enjoying this quite a bit. Clint Worthington, 3.5 stars. Brian Young, who's been on the show, 4 stars. David Sims, who I know you're a big fan of, gave this 5 stars. 5. Can you believe it? Isaac Feldberg, he logged the movie, but he didn't rate it. He has a very long review on Letterboxd, and it's very positive. He says this is Anderson at his most mature and magical. So there you go. Although I should say Alex Billington, also a friend of the show, 2 stars. So not everybody wants to show up to Asteroid City. Amanda the Jedi gave it 4.5. I believe she saw it at Cannes.
Yeah.
So there you go.
Didn't Alex Billington give it like 2 stars but a heart?
Sounds right. Let me double check that. I didn't notice, but if that's the case, that's that's Alex. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did do that. There you go.
So, I don't know what that means, but yeah.
We're still figuring out how we're going to do Elemental and The Flash. Just trying to figure out scheduling wise, we're going to do both movies in the same episode, one or the other. Also, we do sort of want to talk about. I want to talk about The Blackening. I don't know if you do. But I did not get to screen the movie, so I'm going to go see it in public. I'm going to go to a public screening for this one.
Yeah.
Do you have plans to see it? Mike Overholtz, co-host of Mad Men, he liked it a lot.
The funny thing about The Blackening is I got not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 screening invites to it. But I
did too, but I couldn't make any of them.
Exactly. Yeah, I just couldn't. And I wanted to see it. I've heard it's good. Like, I heard it's funny.
Yeah.
I've heard because initially when I was like, it premiered at TIFF, and I was like, oh, whatever. It's a Tim Story movie. Why is this at TIFF? And then it got like the audience award or something. I was like, oh, and I saw the trailer, and the trailer looks pretty funny. So I'm
the screening for it was for me. The screening I could have made was last night,
right?
But yeah, I had just too many conflicts. But I kind of okay with seeing this at a public screening because I kind of want to see it with an audience.
Exactly.
To be totally honest.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I may or may not be able to see Elemental tonight, depending on what happens at work. But yeah, I mean, I've heard sort of mixed things about that one. I think that movie. Another Cannes film that probably should not have premiered at Cannes. The opposite of Asteroid City, in the sense that, I think the consensus there was more detrimental to the film than beneficial. It just seems the response there wasn't as kind as critics are now.
Right.
So I don't know, or maybe that is beneficial. Maybe people are like, "Well, it's not that bad." So I don't know.
We'll see. Also, there is, there are plenty of other movies we have coming up in July. I'm taking a look at the schedule for that, and we still have a lot of summer to go. A lot of stuff coming up. So if there's anything, I want to get a little bit better at us covering some of these movies because we've been doing one-offs every week. But I did have a thought of we should do more sort of bonus stuff when we can.
Sure.
Yeah, so that we're not missing as much, because I was taking a look, how many movies I've seen this year, and it's pretty low. The last 2 years, I have been watching far fewer movies than I used to, and which I'm fine with. I don't want to, I don't want to step it up too much, but I think because I haven't been doing as many festivals, but also I've just been a little bit more selective. So that's to say, if there's stuff that you want to request, always hit us up. Our email is up, cinemaholics@gmail.com, or hit us up on the socials, go on the In Between Drafts Discord, whatever you want to do.
I mean,
but yeah,
I'm going to be ranting and raving about movies whether I'm recorded or not, so we might as well record these conversations.
That's true. That's true. Sometimes like we're literally like we're jamming in the group chats and we're like, well, why aren't we just recording this? Like,
Right.
record everything, every thought out there in public. All right. We'll see you all in the next one from the Unit of California. I'm John DeGroat.
And if you're in Pennsylvania, I'm Lash.
See you next time.
Bye.